Our presenter this evening is Andrew Ramsay, who is an OU MBA alumni and a member of the OUBS Alumni Council. Andrew had a career in sales negotiation and national account management with major companies, including Danish Bacon, Smith's Crisps, and Bunzl. I think I've pronounced that right. Andrew can tell us later. He then worked for the Royal Mail Group for 5 years, where he was client director and later a bid director. In 2002, Andrew moved to Spain, where he worked briefly for an estate agent before setting up his own business. I will now hand you over to Andrew, who will tell you a bit more about his background. So welcome, Andrew. Andrew, we're not hearing you, so have you clicked your talk button? I seem to have lost Andrew. He was online earlier. I'm not sure what's happened to him. Please bear with us, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording for a moment. Good evening, everyone. Our presenter this evening is Andrew Ramsay, who is an OU MBA alumni and a member of the OUBS Alumni Council. Andrew has had a very long and varied career, and I will leave it for him to introduce himself and tell you all about it. So it's over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Janet. And if you could just set up the slide for me, that'd be great. Great stuff, thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm sorry that I dropped you in the technology there somewhere. First of all, a bit about myself. I'll try not to bore you. I'm a semi-retired estate agent and have the joy of being able to live half the year in Spain and the rest in England. It was working for myself in the final dozen years of my career that enabled me to be able to do that. I'm still a non-executive director of our family business. So how did I end up in this position? Starting back in the 1970s, I worked for more than 10 years in wholesale grocery. In those days, our customers were independent grocers. So at the ripe old age of 26, I was the manager of a wholesale distribution depot with 50 staff. 6 years later, the branch merged with another as industry consolidation got underway. The march of the supermarkets had begun. And few people, one of the things I realized was that industries change and few people can expect to remain in the same career throughout their lives. But what I had gained was a great deal of commercial experience. I went to work for well-known brand names as a national account manager and eventually ended up at Royal Mail. I was a client director and then bid director. I was responsible for negotiation with government departments and major companies. For example, TV licensing was then conducted via the post office, and one of my jobs was to negotiate the contract with the BBC. However, in 2001, when I was 51, Royal Mail was in a pretty poor financial state and was losing £1 million a day. That obviously needed action. So they offered managers over 50 a package which was just too good to refuse. My wife also worked there as a client director. It took us a few minutes to think about it before we accepted. We already had a holiday home in Spain, so we rented out our UK house and moved to Valencia. Royal Mail gave us a lump sum and started to pay our pensions just as if we had worked to 65. Crazy, I know, but that was part of the deal. But I didn't want to spend the next 30 years sitting by the pool. At the time, I spoke very little Spanish, but I needed a job where I could use my commercial experience and negotiating skills. I spotted an advert in the Sunday Times for a UK estate agent which operated in Spain. They were successful in South Costa Blanca, but wanted someone to get them going in North Costa Blanca. I went to work for them and help them to get started. It was a pretty strange market at the time. We brought people over to Spain on so-called inspection trips and paid their flights and hotel. They would stay for 3 days, and 90% of them returned to the UK as the proud owners of a Spanish home. The Spanish thought these people were completely nuts. It was a client who bought a house from me who asked me why I didn't do this job for myself. I'd been there a couple of years, made a lot of contacts, and by then spoke reasonable Spanish. Why did this client suggest that I did this? Presumably because he trusted me and thought I should be using my skills for my own benefit. Just remember that word, trust. I'll come back to it. For the next 4 years, I worked on my own. I used all my contacts in the industry and got lots of recommendations from friends. Estate agencies a great deal about stock that you have for sale, so generating new business was essential. Meeting potential vendors is very important. Everything went very well. I was making money, and then in 2008-09 came the financial crisis, and the Spanish property industry fell off a cliff. So another lesson for me. Don't assume that your business success will last forever. You will always be subject to pressures from the external environment. We decided to rent out the house in Spain and return to our UK home. Of course, it wasn't just the changing property market that took us back, but also the arrival of grandchildren. No matter how committed you are to a business, family is important. By then I was 58. You don't need me to tell you how difficult it is to get a job at that age. Prospective employers would think of me as overqualified, unwilling to be a comparatively junior employee, and yes, as too old. So what to do? We thought we'd set up our own letting and sales business. Now here's a really important point. Why do you want to work for yourself? Is it financial necessity, boredom at work, family, dreaming of a better life? Whatever it is, be honest with yourself before you jump into the deep end. Then came the light bulb moment. My wife and I decided to look at the options for starting a franchised property business. We went to 3 different franchisors. One of them was based in a former police station in Grantham. The guy who interviewed us spent more time telling us about one of the cells where the murder of Beverly Allen had been held than talking to us about our plans. When we left, having spent all day there, my wife and I looked at each other and said, "Nah, not for us. The chemistry has to be right." We settled on Martin & Co. It took us about 8 months of planning from agreeing to take a franchise to actually getting the show on the road. So whatever you do, don't rush. It's better to spend months planning than to get it wrong. Our first office was opened in March 2010 by David Cameron just before he became Prime Minister. He was our local MP, and it meant that we got lots of free publicity for the opening. On opening day, the only property that we had to advertise was our own home and my wife's parents' home. 2 years later, we paid off the bank loan. After less than 5 years, we had 2 offices, a portfolio of 500 properties under contract, and a thriving property sales business. So what did we have to think about on that journey? What follows is not in any particular order, and it's certainly not an exhaustive list. It's just something to make you question yourselves. Please feel free to pick the bones out of it and to ask questions. I was a corporate MBA man. I made the jump to my own successful business, but we all do it in different ways. I have no idea what your plans might be, let alone what you think your USP might be in a new business. I can only offer generic suggestions. Inevitably, much of what follows is based on ideas that I gleaned in the real estate world. It's up to you to translate that to your own situations. If most of this sounds negative, well, it's supposed to make you question your motivation. So, should you form a limited company? It was essential for our franchise agreement, but it might not suit every circumstance. A company might protect your personal finance, but it may not. Don't forget that banks won't lend to a small company unless it has personal guarantees from the directors. The same applies to leasing premises. However, there are tax benefits to a company. I'm not qualified to advise on those, but I would say that we only ever took a minimum salary from the business. I think the current limit's about £8,000 per annum that you can take without having to pay national insurance. The rest should be taken as dividends. Of course, you might still need national insurance contributions if you've not reached the maximum, so do take advice. Where to trade from? Well, that depends on your industry, but unless you intend to work from home as a sole trader, you'll need somewhere. We decided to go for high street shop fronts. All the other local agents were in smaller side roads, so we were bold or stupid. After staff, rent and rates are the biggest costs, so be careful, but don't think too small. Public profile is important. And while you're looking for premises, don't forget that planning rules will prevent you from putting some businesses where you might want to. For example, when we opened in Whitney, only A1 retail was allowed in the main street between certain points, so we had to be just outside that. You probably need change of use permission from the local authority, although you can apply easily enough. It's well worth having an informal chat with the local planning officer to see if he's likely to object. Most simple decisions are taken by the officers, not by the committee, using so-called delegated authority. So do keep the planning office on your side. So turning to finance, of course, depending on the industry, you'll need finance. It's customary nowadays for the startup to provide 30% and the bank 70%. Other industries will vary, so do the research. What will the bank want? Well, they'll certainly want evidence of your likely success. That will include 5 years cash flow and profit forecasts in considerable detail. They'll want to know your background and everything there is to know about your finances. They expect to see a detailed business plan that includes how you propose to market you and your business. The bank will certainly want a fixed and floating charge over your company assets, and they will definitely want a charge on your home. So if you and your spouse are risk averse, don't even go there. Incidentally, banks do like lending to franchisees. The failure rate is low, and the franchisor gives a lot of support to startups, so don't forget to consider a franchise. Working capital. Whatever number you've got in mind, add at least 50%. It always costs you more than you expect to get started. No exceptions. Turning to assets, what should you do? Should you buy them or lease them? Unless you've got unlimited funds, don't even think of buying offices or cars. Office equipment's fine, they can be written off over 4 or 5 years. There are plenty of places that sell second-hand office furniture. Why invest 25 grand in a car when you need every penny for the business? Many of these firms offer deals that include wrapping the car in your corporate design and will take it back after 3 years. Offices, there are thousands of properties out there looking for tenants. Don't think of buying. You should be able to negotiate a 3 or 6 month rent-free period to cover startup costs. Don't go beyond a 10-year lease, and always insist on a break clause if the landlord wants a rent review every 3 or 5 years. So turning to what happens when you run your business and you want to get out. On your profit forecast for the bank, try to include an estimate of what the good will be worth in 5 years' time. Why? Because the bank will be interested, as you must be, in your exit strategy. We knew that our son, who was an army major, wanted to leave the army and go into business. He now runs our agency day to day. You may think of selling the business in 5 or 10 years, but do have some idea about how you plan to exit. So when you do sell, what do you sell? If and when you do sell, you could sell the shares in the company, or you could just sell the goodwill and assets and keep the company. Your accountant will advise you. One of the advantages of selling the shares is that if you founded the company as a £100 startup company, in a few years the shares will be worth tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. That means you'll have to pay capital gains tax on the increase of their value. However, the good news is that HMRC would usually grant you entrepreneurial relief, so capital gains tax would be only 10%. Do take professional advice, use a good accountant and solicitor, and please, please don't be tempted to cut corners in this area. Which brings me to how you spend your time in the new business. As I said, my background was in negotiations and sales, I'm not an accountant. In the lettings business, it will be easy to spend all day dealing with the accounts, collecting rents, paying maintenance contractors, paying landlords, the VAT return, the PAYE return, the wages, monthly management accounts, statutory accounts. It's never ending. Why would I want to do something that is obviously not my forte? One of the best decisions that we made was to outsource the whole lot from day one. A specialist firm of accountants does all of that work for us. They check our client's account daily, prepare the rent processing every day, send it to us by email for sign-off, and then make the payments to landlords. And they do all the other stuff that I mentioned. For our customers, it's completely seamless. They've no idea that we don't do all of that in-house. We could not possibly do it ourselves for less than we pay a specialist. So think about how you want to spend your days when you start your new business. It might not be possible to outsource your accounting, but do consider if you actually need to keep everything in-house and do it yourself. How will you support yourself when you start the business? Few businesses make any money for the first year. You might be giving up a well-paid job to start a business. How are you going to pay yourself when the business isn't generating any profit? It's why so many people fail. They haven't thought about it. My wife and I were fortunate. As I mentioned, we both had occupational pensions as well as rental income. So how will you support yourself and your family in the early months? Earlier I mentioned family. We returned to the UK in 2009, partly because we now have grandchildren. Don't underestimate family issues. Is your spouse or partner joining you in the business? If not, will they support you even when there's no money coming in and you're spending every waking hour at work? And the kids probably won't see much of you either. At the head of this, we talked about trust, so back to that. 3 suggestions for how you might build trust. First of all, run an ethical business. Don't try to cut corners. Never be tempted to pay staff or anyone else in cash. Don't accept business from customers who don't operate in an ethical way. Never offer to waive the VAT if someone pays in cash. The customer will tell his friends, and even if HMRC don't find out, you will have lost all credibility in the marketplace. Secondly, whatever your industry, make sure that you have a qualification or at least a sound knowledge about everything to do with the industry. I and several of our staff took professional qualifications in lettings. We could then talk confidently to customers. They will always spot you if you bluff them, so don't. Third, network, network, network. And I do not mean social media or LinkedIn. They have their place in the 21st century, but it's an apology for networking. Go talk to real people, not their virtual selves. Join a local business breakfast club. Most towns have them. You'll meet other entrepreneurs and be able to exchange information. We did it very early on and met not only people who became our customers, but also people who became our suppliers. If you look them in the eye and listen to them, that's how you build real trust, not on social media. Fourthly, listen to the customer. There's an old saying that we're all born with one mouth and 2 ears. Use them in that proportion. Most salespeople and many estate agents don't do that. Yet if you listen to what the client is saying, you'll save yourself a lot of time. Qualifying leads is vital. In our industry, too many agents just throw a load of properties at a client and hope that one of them will stick. If you find out what the client really wants and listen to them, it should be easier to avoid wasting time. That's what we do in our business. As a result, more than 1 in 4 viewings becomes a let. If you can create the time, join a service organisation. Rotary, Roundtable, Lions, whatever. They're not networking groups. They exist to serve their communities, but also to provide fellowship for members. They have a number of advantages. You will meet people who know people. You'll raise your profile in the local community. And best of all, you'll be serving your community. That has to be worth the investment of your time. Say no to bad business. When we acquired our second office, it had been run for 10 years by a guy who, although he was a lovely bloke, had not got a clue. He just could not say no to a customer, no matter how ridiculous their demands. In an industry where the average commission for a fully managed service is about 10% of the monthly rent, he'd agreed to 7% with some landlords. To make matters worse, that was with no tenancy renewal fees, no tenant fine fees, all the staple things that keep an agent going. What a madness. We had to lose some of the landlords who were just not profitable. Don't be tempted to work for nothing just to get the business going. So turning to staff, there are no perfect people in this world. We made loads of mistakes. A settled team is great, but don't let it get too settled or you won't make progress. Of course we made mistakes with staff. I took on a sales negotiator from another agent. I'd come across her at work and thought she'd be good in our office. She started on a Monday morning. On Tuesday she went to lunch and never came back. As I said, you can always get it right. You can't always get it right. It seemed that the high-speed world of lettings just wasn't what she was used to. I can think of few more satisfying things in business than taking a raw recruit and developing their talent. It's cheaper than taking on fully experienced people, and it helps to build their loyalty to you. Examples of how you can build staff loyalty and develop someone. We took on a young mum who was just coming out of a messy divorce. She joined us part-time as an administrator. That was 6 years ago. Now she's an associate director, professionally qualified, and runs one of our offices. Another example. We took a punt on a guy who had a bit of a checkered history. He'd been caught doing things that he shouldn't have. Nothing financial, I hasten to add, but he'd been out of the industry for a while because he'd done something silly. He's now a hugely respected member of the team, and he's loyal because of how we helped him. Another example. We took a young girl straight from school after A-levels. She was so naive that on the first morning, she put her hand up to ask for permission to go to the toilet. She went on to be an indispensable team member who staff and customers really respect. So build and develop your staff, reward them with personal commission schemes, send them on training courses, have a laugh with them. Make sure you hold a Christmas party for them. That's how you get respect and loyalty. So know about the personnel laws or take good advice. Early on, we had an issue with an administrator who went off sick with stress. We put her onto statutory sick pay, so it wasn't actually costing us anything. But I knew that the employee wasn't as, shall we say, not as stressed as she claimed to be, and he was blocking a job. So I followed a procedure to remove her without breaking the law. So know what you can do in personnel law and what you can't. Keep good personnel records with a file for every employee, and make sure you conduct regular performance appraisals with them. So these last few are soft issues to do with people. When you start out, it's too easy to get bogged down with the hard issues around strategy and starting a business. Maintain a balance with the soft stuff, and it will be okay. Of course, all staff are expensive. If they're properly trained, they'll more than repay their cost to you. I'm in a customer-facing business. In that environment, in order to expand quickly, you cannot risk not having the capacity to handle anything thrown at you. We chose to always have more staff than we could have got by with. As a result, we gave great customer service. Obviously, that doesn't work in all industries, but don't scrimp on staff. It will end up affecting your performance and consequently the bottom line. Turning to marketing, I'm certainly not going to tell you how to market whatever business you set up. All I would say is don't get drawn into the sexy stuff if you don't need it. After staff and premises, marketing is the next big expense. Try doing what the competition don't do. We've always refused to advertise in the local papers. It's what most agents do with pages and pages of houses. Yet where do virtually all inquiries come from? From the internet, from our own website, but usually from the big property portals like Rightmove or Zoopla. So why would we want to advertise in the press? Think about ways to get cheap or free publicity. Sponsor some local event. One of our directors writes a property blog. Loads of people follow it, and it costs us nothing. We use social media to promote new properties, events that we're involved in, and so on. Again, it costs almost nothing. So don't just allocate a marketing budget and spend it. Just think about culture for a minute. If you've been in a big firm with specialists all around you, suddenly you're responsible for everything. It's a big culture shock. Who can you talk to when you need to download? I was lucky. My wife had been an MD at a direct marketing firm before we met. We worked together in our business. In the early months, we would sit at breakfast with notepads and discuss what was happening and why. It's a bit sad, I know, and it's a big change from a corporate culture. So who's going to be your muse? Who are you going to share your concerns with? When you're running your own business, you have to be adaptable. You have to be prepared to adjust your behaviour to changing situations. For example, our franchisor has always tried to get us to offer mortgages to our clients through their partner broker. Of course, we'd earn a commission on any deals done. However, it would be through a faceless call centre. Instead, we have an arrangement with a local mortgage broker. She doesn't pay us any commission. We send her people who need a mortgage, and she sends us landlords who've taken a mortgage with her but need to find a letting agent. How did this arrangement arise? Because we met each other at a business breakfast club. Remember what I said about networking? I'll end on this thought on the ever-changing business landscape. I got my MBA in the mid-1990s while I was working for Bunzl. The graduation ceremony was at Ely Cathedral. The Vice-Chancellor of the OU was Betty Boothroyd, the Speaker of the House of Commons. As she handed me my certificate, she said, "I see that your employer sponsored some of the costs of your degree. Are they pleased with their investment?" I replied, "Presumably not. They just made me redundant." So over to you, Gemma.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And you're probably not aware, Andrew, there have been a couple of issues where you've been cutting in and out with the sound. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for everybody for hanging on. I do realise that was a little bit difficult. And we will be sending out an article with the recording, so you'll be able to hear all Andrew's really sound advice there. We haven't had any questions come in from the audience tonight, but I must admit, I thought you made everything sound so easy, but it clearly can't be. So I just wondered, you know, what is a key thing? Is it just sticking with it, or is it just going for what you know, or is it just the whole holistic approach?
I think there's a holistic approach, but if you think about what's happened in the last 2 days to the lettings industry, unexpectedly, the Chancellor announced in the autumn statement he was going to ban tenant fees, which has been the case in Scotland for a little while now, and obviously we have to adapt to that. My personal opinion is that it will simply push rents up because the charges will go to the landlord eventually and rents will go up, so it will be self-defeating. However, we have to accept it's going to happen. We don't know when it's going to happen, and we just got to take it in our stride. There's no point in bellyaching about it. We just got to get on with it. And I think that's how we've always treated the business. That if there are things, things happen that we can't control, then make the most of it. But I think I mentioned earlier on about Judy, my wife, and I spending hours and hours talking about the business, which we did when we were both living and breathing it. And what happens is you have to try to stand back from it. We're all MBAs, and you've got to be able to stand back and think about it strategically. Try not to get too bogged down in the day-to-day minutiae. Yeah, of course it's important, and you've got to watch it, but don't let getting an extra 10 pence on the sale or something blind you to what's going on in the business as a whole.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. And we've just had a message in from Debbie T. Thank you, Andrew. I am at the start of the process to set up my own business, and I'm taking advice from the local startup advice service. This may be something available in other areas. I must admit that's something I've not heard of.
I haven't heard of it either, but it sounds like a really good idea. I think that any help you can get in the early days is to be commended.
Fantastic. Debbie, could I just ask if you type whether it's a government funded thing or is it a local sort of business? Oh, it's provided by the council. That sounds excellent. I think we should all move to where Debbie lives. Okay. I can't see any other questions coming in, so I think what I'll say for tonight is, because everybody's had a little bit of trouble with the sound, if anybody wants to send in some questions, I'm sure Andrew wouldn't mind answering them. I'm sorry, Andrew, I'm putting you on the spot here.
Absolutely fine.
Okay. Well, thank you all for bearing with us tonight, and thank you, Andrew. As I said earlier, you make it sound so easy, but I'm sure it's not. I mean, when you mentioned the planning office, my blood ran cold. So thank you very much indeed, and good night, everybody.